Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
About to crank out another one of these shorter podcasts for the day. It's funny, I keep saying I'm going to try and find something to put in that third segment of the Monday show if we do not have a weekend pay-per-view worth discussing. And then I watch Weekly Modern Wrestling, and by the time the show's over, I don't even want to think about the garbage that's out there today, especially on the indie market. But that's the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast for you. Just giving it to you like it is. And of course, we've got two modern wrestling shows to talk about today, one of which had its share of good moments up and down, and the other was AEW Rampage. Before we get to that, though, remember that if it's your first time checking us out, whether you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, give the show a support. Make sure you stop back each Monday and Friday for new material and new podcasts. I know WrestleMania season's right around the corner, so that'll be a fairly packed weekend in the coming few weeks. But in the meantime, today is just the normal AEW Rampage and NWA Powerrr rundown, as we do each Monday. And of course, Friday's show, we've got AEW Dynamite and the continuation of our retro review series on NWA World Championship Wrestling from 1986 and World Class Championship Wrestling from 1983. My favorite show of the week because of those two segments alone. And if you like what you hear on the show today, make sure to subscribe, give the show a like, leave a comment, and maybe a suggestion or two on any future recommendations for the Monday show in the event that there is not a major weekend pay-per-view event worth talking about. Let me know, what's everyone into these days? What are the cool kids watching? And if you say GCW, I already got you covered. That was a one-and-done pit stop, and we ain't ever visiting that outhouse again. At least not on this show. Again, I am still intrigued to see what Tony Khan does with Ring of Honor going forward. Maybe if we see some kind of reboot with that show, I might give it a go and try to affiliate that with the Monday show. Anyhow, like I said, this will be a relatively shorter show with our two recaps today. So let us get going with this edition of AEW 205 Live. Kicking things off with Isiah Cassidy versus Darby Allin, which I very passively watched while I was pursuing my usual Saturday morning tasks. You know, the usual. Brewing my coffee, getting a drink of water, getting dressed, and pretty much doing everything but paying attention to what was going on in the ring. Of course, I'm being facetious, but I mean, really, did I miss anything that important? It's Darby Allin and Isiah Cassidy. I'm sure they did a million high offensive moves. Most of it probably didn't make a lick of sense. And factor in the completely predictable finish on top of that. I mean, seriously, am I missing anything? I already knew the match wasn't going to be for me. I did briefly catch the point early on in the match where Cassidy rammed Darby into the steps right in front of Sting, who sold it by just standing there stoically, not caring at all. The 450 splash that Cassidy did to Darby on the outside looked pretty awesome, in fact. So awesome that you'd think something like that would be perfect for, say, I don't know, a fucking finish? Sorry, I don't know why I still get bent out of shape about AEW being stupid. I guess the thing that irritated me the most about the 450 was that, like, they ended up just going with the finish less than a minute later. With Darby going over with a Fujiwara armbar of all fucking things. Like, what? So all of a sudden, Darby's the submission specialist. Does anyone get hired to agent these matches? Get someone with a clue to at least come up with competent finishes? Like the whole thing afterwards with Andrade's Geek Squad coming out, but then the Hardys come out shortly thereafter, only for them to all wind up standing at the top of the stage like morons. Again, who's booking this stuff? Who comes up with these lame segments? You just debuted Jeff Hardy on Dynamite in underwhelming fashion, might I add. And in his second appearance, he just comes out to stand at the top of the stage while his music plays. Is that really why you signed Jeff to a contract? So you could buy the rights to his music and get a pop from the crowd? Tony's such a fucking idiot. Wardlow versus Scorpio Sky for the TNT title is apparently happening. I think there's coming Dynamite, right? At least that's what I think they said. I mean, that'll be intriguing. See if they actually go with the rapid fire title change, or if MJF actually fucks over Wardlow and they keep the belt on Scorpio for the foreseeable future. Honestly, I have no idea why they would. It's Scorpio Sky. Like, dude hasn't had a meaningful match in AEW since the TV match he had with Chris Jericho like 2 years ago. But whatever. Mercedes Martinez versus Jamie Hayter was a thing that just kind of happened on the show. Wasn't good, wasn't terrible, just kind of there. I did laugh at the finish when the heels ran interference to help out Jamie, only for her to go over with a running clothesline, of all things. Think about all the ridiculous fucking kickouts we see on this show all the time, yet here's a 15-year veteran of the business doing a clean job to an undercard girl with a clothesline. Again, I ask, who's agenting this? You know, I'll say this, though, because I have noticed that whether or not it's Tony's call, I have seen a considerable lack of bad women's matches on this show as of late. Like, I still remember that period just a few months ago where it felt like every fucking week on this show, we get horrible match after horrible match after horrible match with the girls. It's Penelope Ford and the Bunny and Anna Jay and Nyla Rose and all the really bad undercard talent stinking up the joint on the show left and right. At least I will say this with the women's matches. They've gone from wretchedly horrible to mostly bad. And it's a vast improvement, trust me. Can't do much about Jade Cargill since she's a TBS champion. Her matches are still the shits, but I'll take one awful women's match over the course of a couple weeks instead of an awful women's match on every show. How about we leave it at that? Keith Lee killing QT Marshall in the factory was fine, minus Keith selling. But that's AEW booking for you. Can't ever just have big guys smash geeks in 10 seconds. Now, of course, we got to let QT Marshall, of all fucking people, get in offense. Guess it's ever so important that we keep QT strong on this show. Got to give him some credibility. Whatever. I was alright with Hobbs and Starks laying out Keith after the match. You know, they teased the feud already, and it was something I advocated for when Keith first showed up. I don't like the idea of it being like a pairing of Starks and Hobbs going after Keith at the same time, because that'll evidently mean that Keith will end up getting wedged into some kind of tag feud, and that's the last thing Keith Lee needs to be doing, it's tag matches. Like, a guy Keith's size should be just plowing through fuckers left and right. So, I mean, even if it means taking out Starks in the interim before he gets to Hobbs one-on-one, like, I'd rather see that. But guess we'll see what direction they go. If they could avoid the tag team thing, though, I'd be all for that. Because, like I said, I don't need to see Keith Lee doing tag matches on this show. Just it immediately buries him in the mid card, and that's not what I want to see with him. And then our main event, Isaiah Swerve Scott beating Tony Nese in a match that, again, just happened. Yes, Tony Nese getting the main event spot on AEW's second premiere show. We're still trying to pretend these people haven't given up. Yeah, I probably mentioned this a time or two when I used to watch him in NXT, but Swerve is another guy that he can do all the athletically impressive things, and I don't know, like, if it was 1993 or 1994 and we were watching Monday Night Raw and Swerve was a one-of-a-kind athlete surrounded by much bigger guys, he might stand out more as a talent. Kind of like how Sean Waltman stood out in WWF around that point because he was the quick on his feet, fast athlete surrounded by mostly bigger, more muscly guys. But in AEW, he's just another interchangeable, athletically gifted guy. Like in NXT and WWE, I think he stood out a little more when he would be wrestling for the Cruiserweight title, but man, like I'm watching here and I'm just trying to conceptualize in my head where I see a guy like Isaiah Swerve Scott winding up in AEW like 2 or 3 years down the road. I see just another guy. Look, unless they're going to push hard to try and incorporate some of his hip-hop or rap stuff into his segments, like, I just can't envision them ever doing anything with him as standard pro wrestler Swerve Scott. Because like I said, he can do all the flashy stuff, and he's got charisma, but does he have main event star potential? Does he have the it factor? Not really. At least I don't see it. Now, granted, he's got more star potential than generic build the WWE Superstar looking Tony Nese. So maybe they could have given him a better opponent to start off with. But even watching this match play out, you know, when it's over, the only thing I can think is, why exactly did we need to see this on TV? And again, it all goes back to what I mentioned in the Keith Lee squash. It's Swerve's first match in AEW. It's supposed to be a showcase match for him. So A, why is this match going almost 15 minutes? And B, why is Tony Nese getting in so much offense on him? Well, we all know the answer. It's because Tony Khan doesn't know what the fuck he's doing or how to book wrestling. But if he hired people that knew what they were doing, or he had the right people in his ear making suggestions that would better improve the quality of his booking, maybe we'd avoid me having to ask important questions like the ones I just posed. But again, I can't do that because how dare I question 2-time Booker of the Year? I guess I'll piss off the marks. So that was WWE main event. Or, oh God, it just escaped me. What was that failed show that WWE tried to run in like the early to mid 2010s? It was on Saturday mornings. And it went over like a fart in church. I remember it. What was it called? Slam? Saturday Morning Slam? Does anyone remember that show? God, remember how quickly that tanked? Just a bunch of worthless squash matches with geeks that no one could possibly care about. Kind of like Rampage in a lot of ways. Am I right? But, you know, that tends to happen when Tony books and structures shows like he's playing with action figures or video games. On paper, it might sound enticing to do Tony Nese versus Swerve Strickland or Swerve Scott, whatever he's going by now. Doesn't mean it's going to execute well on television. In theory, Darby Allin and Isaiah Cassidy might be fun if I was playing a video game rendition of it. Doesn't mean it executes well on TV. Again, I talk about this all the time when it comes to this show. Where's the star power? Where are the important key segments? Where's the important key talent? Well, we all know the answer to that. They all get crammed on Dynamite every week. Like, offhand, just something as simplistic as sending out CM Punk or MJF to do a promo. Would that be so hard to do? I just came with that on a whim. Like, if you're going to stray away from video packages or pre-tapes or interviews, at least have MJF or Punk go out there and cut a promo for 5 minutes. Give the show something resembling importance or implication. Apparently that's too hard to ask. So as we passively work through Rampage, let's move right along here to NWA Powerrr from March 8th, which I did have a little more to talk about on this one. At least this show puts in effort. May not always be a perfectly run show, but at least Billy Corgan's attempting to do something resembling constructive pro wrestling. We begin with Austin Idol and Tyrus comically trying to bury the ill-begotten, referring to them as the ill-forgotten. Tyrus stole my gimmick. The only thing I wrote down about this segment was Kyle Davis's complete inability to hold the microphone still. What happened was Tyrus and Idol are cutting this promo into the side of the microphone for like 95% of the segment, and then right before they wrap up, Idol grabs the microphone, puts it like right at the edge of his mouth, completely peaks the audio, and I think he shattered my right eardrum. Just the right eardrum, not the left one. I don't know why. And then we cut to the ring with Joe Galli and Scion, wherein Galli asked Scion up front who his father was. And Scion's response? Quote, "Nobody wants to see me talk. They want to see me fight." Unquote. And then Galli goes, "All right then, tag team action up next." So the suspense continues. And that all led into an 8-man tag that featured Scion, the Ill-Begotten, and Mims versus all members of Idolmania Sports Management, which I believe consists of Black G's, Marshe Rocket, Jordan Clearwater, and Tyrus. I did get a laugh when Clearwater went to remove his golden entrance robe, and Idol casually goes, "The golden boy with the golden toy." So perhaps Clearwater is partaking in the golden penis syndrome dilemma that has apparently struck the internet in recent weeks. The action was relatively fine, but I don't know. I'm watching all 8 guys in there, and when you really think about it for more than 2 seconds, aside from Scion and Tyrus, what are you really working with in this match? It's a bunch of mostly underwhelming undercard guys. I still have no idea who the guys are on the Ill-Begotten team. Like no joke. They've literally become the second coming of the Naturals. It's going to be 6 years down the road of me watching NWA, I'm still not going to have a fucking clue who those guys are. I'll remember the team name, but you put a gun to my head and say, name the actual guys in the team. Just pull the trigger, man, because I'm not going to know. And I've been high on Mims for my own personal biases, but at the end of the day, it really became clear during this match just how gutted NWA's roster is. And even though Tony owns the rights to Ring of Honor and basically all of managing operations, I am still holding out hope that because of the fact that the former talent roster are all considered free agents now, maybe NWA will work out an agreement to bring in some of those former guys in the coming year, because man, they could really use some heavy hitters right now, especially in that mid-card department. Like I said, they did some stuff for a while. Action was harmless enough. The finish was every tag cluster breakdown you've seen 100,000 times. Mims and Tyrus are in there momentarily, which I don't even think Tyrus was the legal guy, but that's beside the point. And after Mims goes to try and pick up Tyrus for a body slam, Rocket comes in the back door, trips up Mims, and Tyrus does the pancake splat on top of Mims to get the win for the heels. I'm still under the assumption that the eventual plan is to revisit the Tyrus Scion TV title program down the road. I don't know when that would be, but it still kind of seems like they aren't ready to wrap that feud up yet. So, maybe they could go with some kind of mask versus title stipulation just to give it a little more intrigue. But like I said, I presume that feud's not over yet. Then we get the I Quit match between Tom Latimer and Nick Aldis. A feud that I kind of forgot was a thing from late last year, given how underwhelming the follow-up has been since the injury angle they shot with Strictly Business. And also judging how poorly they've done following up with the Blood feud since last year, I guess I should have expected this match to be somewhere in the ballpark of underwhelming too. And look, I don't want to sit here and blame either guy because I'm a big fan of Nick Aldis. Tom Latimer's great. They worked hard in this match. They did their best to give it a big fight feel, but between the time allotted to the actual segment and the whole environment from bell to bell, I just don't think it ever reached that point. The sequence where Latimer was wedging the turnbuckle post into Aldis' mouth, the only thing running through my head the entire time is, could you get any more unsanitary? I'm already kind of over the whole use of plunder in wrestling as it is, and maybe that was kind of why I was turned off from the match. They did take some pretty brutal bumps here, especially Latimer. There was an incredibly stupid spot involving a chair that really should have just been done away with entirely, and I can purely blame Aldis for that one. If you watch the match, you know what I'm talking about, but just in case you missed it, Aldis has Latimer up over his back in sort of like a guillotine choke, and there's a chair set up while Aldis is holding up Latimer. And while Aldis has Latimer up over his back, Aldis has his back turned to the chair entirely, and he tried to give Latimer a face-first bump onto the chair. I presume he was aiming for the flat seat part of the chair, but obviously because Aldis couldn't see where he was dropping Latimer, he ended up dropping Latimer face and jaw first on the top of the chair. I screamed, Velvet screamed, Joe Galli screamed. We all thought he was dead upon impact. There was a sort of comedic element to it. As soon as Latimer took this brutal face-first bump onto the chair, he's laying prone and dead on the ring mat, and there's the dumbass referee with the microphone to go, "What do you say, Latimer? You want to give it up?" Fucking moron. But yeah, lesson is, don't do stupid shit like that, guys. Generally, I would say this was a good match with some good storytelling, but when you think about what an I Quit match has meant throughout the course of wrestling history, you date back to all the classic I Quits throughout the years, Tully and Magnum and Starrcade 85, Rock and Foley at the 99 Royal Rumble. I think I even saw John Cena do an I Quit match at one point that was 10 times better than this one. I don't remember who he wrestled, but I seem to recall Cena doing either some kind of last man standing or I Quit style match where he did a massive blade job. The point, though, did this match ever reach a level of intensity that an I Quit match should? No. There was no blood, for one, and for my money, that immediately screamed out PG to me. In fact, the whole thing just felt really PG. Like, when you really get down to brass tacks, it was a watered-down 2022 version of a high-intensity grudge match. And again, nothing against the two workers here, because Aldis and Latimer are very talented. They tried a lot of cool things in this match to try and make it feel important and give it the feel of a real grudge blow-off. But between the little time they got for the match, the lack of blood, and the general slow pace from start to finish, just didn't work in execution. And I remember saying a very similar thing about their first match. I think when they just had the regular standard singles match at the end of last year, I remember being relatively disappointed with that one too. Maybe they figured because of the blood in the main event, they didn't want to go back to the well with it in 2 matches, going back to back with Juice. Okay, I get that, but then that really boils down to a problem of card placement and show structuring. Like, if you're going to do a blood angle in your world title match, then you should have the common sense to say, well, the I Quit match is going to probably call for blood too because of the heavy-hitting feel and the stiffs, so maybe we should just put those matches on 2 different shows. I mean, it's taped anyway, so why not? Like, why couldn't we push Aldis and Latimer to the main event of last week's show instead of doing them on the same show? Of course, it's trivial now, but something to think about going down the road. And then we got the NWA World Heavyweight title match with Matt Cardona versus Trevor Murdoch, which again, spoilers have been out there for well over a few weeks now, so I already knew going in that the title change was evident, but I was particularly interested to see how they'd pay it off. And I'll go ahead and admit that it came off a lot better than I expected going in. There was one pretty major gripe that I had about the finishing spot, but we'll get to that in a minute. I got a kick out of this. There was one very passionate fan that detested Trevor here. He loathed Trevor Murdoch, claiming that Trevor is, and I quote, the worst champion ever. Harsh. Really? Worst world champion in NWA history? Worse than Carlos Colon? Worse than Ronnie Garvin? Oops, did I say that out loud? Sorry, Jim. And in fact, to my utter surprise, the crowd was actually pretty 50-50 split for both guys in this match. There was a very passionate subset of the crowd that vehemently hated Trevor and vehemently hated Cardona, and they made sure to let everyone hear it. But to put it as moderately as I can, this was about as close to a real old-school World's Championship match that you could really hope for in the modern wrestling market. Obviously, Trevor is not Ric Flair, so he ain't going 45-minute Broadways at this stage in his career. But when you go back and take a look at some of those classic tapes of Harley Race back in the day, you can definitely tell that this is more of Trevor's wheelhouse when it comes to his ring work, and I appreciate that. And I thought that given the circumstances and the fact that I'm not a Matt Cardona fan by any stretch, I'm not a fan of his ring work, I thought he did fine in there with Trevor. I still can't remove the vision of watching him do that garbage match with Joey Janela on that GCW show I watched, or the fake intergender match he did on that Impact pay-per-view. But I'm also not going to completely dismiss the guy, because I know Cardona can do the old school style. A lot of his work here was reminiscent of what I used to see him do in WWE. And when I see Cardona doing more stuff like this, I can get more into it. I'd prefer seeing this over all the outlaw indie-looking bullshit, but can't do much about that. And they told a very simple but very effective story. Trevor outworked and outpaced Cardona early on, did all the basics and fundamentals in the book. Cardona did some heel stalling and crowd bantering for a while, and they built up to the big spot where Cardona gave Trevor the double-arm DDT on the outside floor. Trevor did a great blade job, did great selling while Cardona got the heat on him. Of course, the one thing I hated about the match, and it makes no sense when you go back and watch it, but all you can really chalk it up to is bad agenting and referee incompetence. Cardona goes under the ring and brings in a chair, and he wedges it between the turnbuckle pads for a spot that would happen about 5 minutes later in the match. It's straight out of the WWE playbook. Set up gimmicks and walk away from the gimmicks to anticipate the spot coming later instead of just doing the fucking spot then and there. It's dumb, it's pointless, but I've already been over that 1,000 times. The stupid part is that the ref is clearly looking at this chair in the corner of the ring for like 5 straight minutes. And does he ever think to go over and push the chair out of the ring to dislodge it from the corner to prevent shenanigans from happening? No, of course not. He just lets it sit there in the corner so that Trevor can go face first into it right before he counts to 3 like a complete idiot. So that sucked. But the whole goal was to get the belt on Cardona, which for story purposes makes sense given how they've been building up the show. Trevor was never going to be a long-term world champion, and that's fine. He didn't need to be. They've been going the direction of pushing Pope toward the world title, so it looks like that'll be the end goal down the pike. And there is a part of me that is looking forward to seeing that payoff when it comes. But I like the afterbirth with Nick Aldis coming out to confront Cardona and his new posse, which now consists of Mike Knox, Chelsea Green, and, as I wrote down here, some guy named VSK. I presume he's a Ring of Honor guy. Of course, while Cardona's thanking all of his friends in his post-match heat promo, he gets to thanking VSK, and the only thing I could think the entire time was, who the fuck is VSK? We never found out. Anyway, so Aldis and Cardona are apparently the next program for the Crockett Cup show in late March, I believe, which should be good. I don't expect Nick to win the belt back there, but it'll be a nice placeholder program for the time being. And overall, I didn't hate the show. I think I would say the biggest problem with this one for me was time management and lack of big fight feel, especially for that I Quit match. But like I alluded to, there was some good stuff throughout the program. Aldis and Latimer had some good moments, and the Camille throwing in the towel at the end there, I presume that means the program is not over yet. I've never been a big fan of the whole towel gimmick in wrestling, but I think more of that has to do with the fact that it's just been done to death over the years and just kind of comes off like lazy booking at the end of the day. And while I'm not a Cardona fan by any stretch, the main event did what it was supposed to do, and the Trevor Blood angle was pretty cool. It definitely gave him more of a sympathetic babyface feel, which is good. And I am intrigued to see if they actually go the direction of building up Pope as the guy to ultimately beat Cardona for the belt later in the year. Which, yes, in the meantime means that I'll have to put up with a long-standing Matt Cardona world title reign. We'll see how long that takes before it gets old. And as we wind things down for the show, again, please make sure to subscribe. And I didn't mention this at the top of the program, but make sure you click that bell icon to stay posted for upcoming shows. Each Monday and Friday here on YouTube and Rumble. Again, if you prefer to watch the show on Rumble, I will always leave a link, and vice versa. If you're watching on Rumble, I'll always leave the YouTube link, so you pick your platform. Please do me a solid, like the show, leave a comment down below to share your thoughts on what we discussed today. Again, we'll be back on the usual Friday for a deeper dive into classic content as we explore more retro wrestling. And whatever AEW decides to do with their usual car wreck, throw shit at the wall style booking. Buckle up. Take care, all. Peace out.